you're here. Was he trying to rent you the room?
Plus his fee.
He knows my fee, $60 an hour.
Thank you, sir.
Did you invite him?
I will invite you.
He might heckle
I'm
me.
gonna make sure. Oh,
He might heckle me, but that
would you do that? Would you heckle this chef?
I would return it.
Yeah. We could have a little.
He knows that.
Well, could be a little part of the humor of the lunch.
And then your other guy, Mr. Latimer, he might.
But your wife was there.
No, he knows better. He knows better.
Yeah. That's the key.
Well, good afternoon once again, everybody. I think we're ready to start. So normally what would happen is the minister would be here, but of course we don't have a minister. And in his absence, the inter-moderator would be here, but he's busy with his own church at St. Giles this morning. So he's going to join us when he is free to do so. So we'll just open up the meeting, and when he gets here at an appropriate time, we'll let him make his comments. Okay? So let's begin. We should open our meeting with prayer, so let's do that. Gracious God, we come before you at this annual meeting to discuss the activities of Graceview Church in the last year. And as we do so, we give you thanks for the year that has been, for all who have worked so hard to keep things moving, for our faithful and loving congregation, for our inter-moderator to Reverend Tim Bruno, and for the support we received from our presbytery. Lord, you know that the last year has been difficult for Graceview. Unexpected events that have happened, and we know that your plans for us are better than our plans, and we trust in you that you will lead us in the direction that will keep us moving forward. Now we ask for you to be with us this afternoon at our congregational meeting to guide and to direct our discourse and our decision making. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, first order of business is to ask for nominations, not nominations, a motion for some person to become the chairperson. So I would like for someone to make a motion that some person become a chairperson. So, Sheila.
I nominate Al Bishop.
Thank you. We have a nomination for Al Bishop. Do I have a seconder for that? We have lots of seconders, but the first one I see is Susan. So, all in favor? Thank you. I think that's carried pretty well unanimously. Thank you, Al. Congratulations. Now, we need to do this once again for a recording secretary. So I would like for someone to make a motion that someone becomes recording secretary. Janet.
I nominate Sandy Taylor.
Now, which one? Jackie Taylor. Do I have a seconder for that? Sheila? Thank you. And all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so Al is the chairperson, Jackie is the recording secretary, and we'll hand the meeting over to them. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for coming to this meeting. This is an important meeting. We're required to have this meeting once a year, required by the Presbyterian Church in Canada. But it's also an important meeting because at this meeting we receive reports of what happened last year, We talk about those reports and ask and answer any questions and make decisions about what we're going to do in the coming year, including what our budget will look like. There's a couple of things you should have either seen or have with you, and there are copies of some of these things at the back. So hopefully you all have a copy of the agenda. It would be good if you also had a copy of the 2022 annual report, and it would be good if you have at least read the minutes of last year's annual meeting. And if you don't have copies of those things and would like, put up your hand, and someone will give you a copy, because there were extra copies at the back if anyone needs one. So if you want one and don't have it, put up your hand. The reports of the various activities and groups are contained in the annual report, and you will have an opportunity to ask questions of the committees who led those activities. So if you are the chair of one of the committees and we come to your section of the report in the agenda, if there's something you'd like to add, you can do that, but mostly I just would like you to be available if someone has a question. And when it comes time to make any necessary decisions, we will do that by first talking about the questions, and then we'll make a motion about the decision, and then we'll discuss that motion, and then we'll vote on it. Everyone will have an opportunity to express their views about each question on which a decision is required, but I ask each person to speak only once on each question and to express their views for or against the motion, and not about what someone else may have said about the motion. The motion is then voted for or against, and each motion must be fully dealt with before we can move on to the next motion, because we can only have one motion on the floor at any time. Any questions before we start? Okay. So, can we first of all have a motion to adopt the agenda? Is there anyone? Sandy, yeah. Seconder? Norma. All in favor? That's carried. When Tim arrives, we'll ask Tim to make a few comments. The minutes of the 2022 annual general meeting that were held in February of last year, it's about 13 months ago now, were circulated, and we will be adopting those minutes today. Are there any comments or questions on those minutes? And if not, can we have a motion to adopt the minutes of last year's annual meeting? Comments or questions? Motion to adopt? Thank you. That was Maureen. Seconder? Robin. All in favor? I think this year we'll try and circulate those minutes to everybody as soon as the minutes are ready, so this meeting will be a little fresher in your minds. Then we'll adopt them a year from now, but you will at least have seen them closer to the time when the meeting actually took place. I looked at those minutes and I didn't see any business arising from the minutes that we needed to deal with today, but does anyone have any business arising from those minutes that they'd like to raise? Okay. So we'll move on to the annual report. You'll recognize that the format of the annual report this year is very similar to what it was last year. In format, the content is a little bit different, but the format of the report itself is very similar. If there are any comments on that or any questions, Lynn, who was part of the committee led by Bob in the preparation of that report, will answer any questions. So, are there any questions about the annual report? Okay. So then we will deal with the next item, which is the questions on the various committees. And the committees are listed on the report in no particular order. First, there is Mission Committee, and the chairs are Nancy McPherson and Maureen. Do either of you have anything you'd like to add? And then are there any questions that you would like to address to the chairs? Okay. If not, we'll move on to the next one. The Outreach Committee. Sheila Thomas, do you have anything you want to add, or does anyone want to ask Sheila any questions about the Outreach Committee?
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for all their support through the past year, for all the initiatives that we undertook. We really appreciate it.
Okay. I think the congregation appreciates all the work you do, all the work that all the committees do, actually. Music and Worship Committee, Susan and Kathy. Do you want to add anything, or does anyone have any questions or comments they want to address to the co-chairs of Music and Worship? Okay. The Finance Committee. I think we'll be talking about the Treasurer's report in a while, and I think any comments from the Finance Committee can be dealt with at that time, but does anyone have any questions they want to ask? It's a tough job, Bob. The Audio-Visual Committee. Bob, do you want to?
Listen, we've got an audio-visual team here. They have to leave, but our team consists of Eldrin, Charon, and Eric Charon, and Norma Hendershot, and Jackie Taylor, and me. And prior to Eldrin and Eric showing up, we were struggling through and doing, a pretty good job. But those guys have really taken it over and made it something else indeed. So in their absence, let's just recognize them.
Okay.
I hear a comment there, and you're absolutely right, and we should also recognize what Joan is doing. Joan, every week, running that every week without fail. So, thank you, Joan. Where is Joan anyway? Oh, there you are. Thank you, Joan.
Probably some of you are wondering how Joan gets those birds to fly just at the right time. So you'll have to check with her privately how she accomplishes that, but she does a good job. Property Committee. We owe Earl, in particular, a huge vote of thanks for what he does on the Property Committee, and with assistance from Jackie and Ina. Do any of you want to say anything, or do any of you want to ask a question of those? Earl.
No, I just like to thank the 5 people that signed up for April and May to do the snow on the sidewalk.
Presbyterians aren't stupid, Earl. Anything else? Nancy.
I've had the fortunate opportunity to visit a number of other churches. I went to a church today that was very old, older than this, but it was very much like this, except they had a whole lot more light at the front of the church. And they talked about I am, what the good Lord said, I am. And I would just like the congregation to give some serious thought to about how we can sitting on our hands. We need to do something to reinvent the light. And I hope that we can have a look at that in the future. The property group, they're doing a wonderful job, but I think we should be looking at some bigger visions for the property group.
Okay. Then I think we're ready to move on to the report on computers and office systems, which, Bob, I think you want to say a few things about that.
So back in January, we at the Finance Committee, we talked about the expenses we were incurring for computer-related things, hardware and software, and they seemed a little on the high side, and so we were wondering, like, why, and are we getting good value for the money we're spending? So I was asked if I would put together a group of people to take a look at that. And we did that, and the group of people we put together consisted of Eldrin and Eric Charon, Joan Duncan, Norma Hendershot, Robin Selfer, Ina Wallace, and myself. And we met twice for fairly lengthy meetings and went over a lot of things and a lot of emails back and forth over the last few months. And we created a report which has gone to well, it went to the Finance Committee and sort of to the Property Committee, but it's not really decided where it's going to land and how it's going to be implemented. But there are a couple of things on it that may cost a little bit of money that are not budgeted for. And in the interest of an abundance of communication and full disclosure, I just wanted to mention those things to you. One of them is our telephone system. We have only two telephones in the church, and they're both behind locked doors. When there's nobody in those offices. And we think we have to do something about that situation to make more phones available, just in case of an emergency. And there are other things related to the telephone system that we think needs some look at. How much will it cost? I don't know. It'll probably cost something, probably not a lot, but it's not budgeted for at the moment. So there will be some ongoing things there, and I guess if any of you have a comment about the phone system now or later in an email or something, would be a good time to raise it. So I'll just stop there and ask if you have any comment about our telephone system. It's not something that it's at the forefront of everybody's mind, I know. We had phones downstairs, yes, just on the outside wall of the kitchen, but it doesn't work. But it's there. It just doesn't work, that's all. And we think that it should, because, you know, if there were something happened down there where people needed to communicate with the outside world, that's one of the things. Welcome, Tim. Okay, anything else? So that's under review. Yes? Well, that's another thing, which is sort of a tangential consideration, and whether that is solved with a telephone or not, we don't know. But during the course of our discussion, it came to mind that we have an elevator, and normally when it's in use, there's lots of people in the church. But there could be a situation where someone was alone in the church, maybe moving something up and down stairs, using the elevator, and if the elevator stopped between floors, what do you do? Well, I would hope there's some sort of an emergency system in there, but we don't know for sure, or at least our committee didn't know for sure. So that is something also we need to look at. Yes, again. Well, that's a possible solution. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't be good. No. Yeah. Sandy? yeah, we do not want that to happen. It's a pretty rare thing, but we want to guard against that happening. So that's under consideration, and what the solution would be, we don't know at the moment. Okay, so the other thing that would cost some money is that booth back there. Some years ago, I think when Stephen Duncan came to this church, Dave and Earl, I think, built that booth for the audiovisual equipment, and it served us well for years and continues to serve us well. But the audiovisual equipment has expanded since then to include the live stream and more equipment, more wiring, more people, and it's pretty cramped. And if one person wants to get out, they have to climb over everybody else. So that is something that really needs some expansion. So there's a couple of plans being looked at there. Again, I don't know what it will cost. I don't think it will cost a lot. And I think there's probably a way that we can get the presbytery to help us, because there is a, I forget exactly what it's called, but a fund for capital improvements that's available to churches. So can't really promise that they will pick up the bill, but they probably will. But there's an outside chance that there still will be some out-of-pocket costs for Graceview. So wanted to let you know that as well. And that's it, unless there's a question about that. Okay.
Thank you. Tim, thank you for coming. We said at the beginning of the meeting that we would let you make your comments as soon as you got here, but I think it might be appropriate to let you speak at the end. It's always an advantage to be the last person to speak. So if you could do that and then do the closing prayer, I think that would be good. I'd like that anyway. The next item on the agenda is the Treasurer's Report, and there were some copies of the Treasurer's Report at the back. It's this several pages stapled together. I think there were some extras, so if anyone wants a copy of that before I turn this over to Robin, put up your hand and someone from the back will bring that to you. One here. Margaret. Any others? One there, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, someone's coming. Margaret, yeah. Okay, well, I will turn this over to Robin now, and he will talk about the Treasurer's Report from last year and the budget for 2023.
So can everybody hear me okay? So I'll start just by saying the package has about 5 or 6 pages. It starts with the balance sheet or the financial position. The next page is the income statement. And then if you go to the back 2 pages, it's the budget. The presentation will start by going to page 2, which is on the income statement, just to let you know what happened. And then we'll come back and talk about something that happened in the balance sheet. Before I start, I would like to make a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to thank 2 particular people that have helped me throughout the year. And that's Ina, who's always there when I need support, answers to questions, etc., and handles all the processing of the deposits, including banking at all times. And to Joan, who's done a remarkable job in taking up the accounting and entering all the accounting that we do on a day-to-day basis and taking that away from the treasurer, which has been really helpful. Also like to thank the Finance Committee, as usual, for their support. And finally, the Audit Committee, led by Nancy Green, for their support. And Nancy asked me to put a comment at the end of the meeting, which I will do. So if I start, my presentation this morning will briefly discuss the results of the year just ended, and then review the 2023 budget, as Al said he would. It's shown in the summary format on the annual report on pages 16 to 18, I think. But I will point out that some of the figures are not exactly the same, and that's just a matter of presentation. In the situation related to what I present, this is one that has to be presented to the Revenue Canada, has to meet certain methodologies, I guess you could say. So it tends to net expenses and income off. And in the case of the annual report, it's a document prepared by management and is there to give you a better understanding of comparison than some of the accounting systems would naturally do. At the end of this, I'll be going through the 2023 through budget, and in the 2023 budget, there is a requirement to get it approved by the congregation for going forward. So let's start by looking at page 2, for those who want to do there. Despite this year's featuring unexpected events, I think everybody knows what they are, the overall receipts exceeded disbursements by, and therefore showing a surplus of 28,000 compared to a deficit of 16,000 in 2021. If I go through the statement highlights, I just should mention, if you look at the sheet itself, the actual results are in the first 3 columns, and then the one I'm really comparing to is the 221 actual is on after the budget. So that going through the statement highlights themselves, revenue grew from 146,000 in 2021 to 226,000 in 2022. The main reason for this were the receipts of bequests of 64,000, including one for 52,000, plus grants from the West Presbytery of 22,000. They're on that sheet there. There are 2, one's for COVID, or they call the COVID grant, and the other one is called a Church in Distress grant. I will make a mention as being somewhat critical of the hierarchy in the past. They are trying their best to put money from what they have down to the congregations. And I think as Presbyterians, it's very difficult for them to do that because, as you know, they have 100% of people are owners of the church. There isn't a hierarchy approach. So when they come to make decisions, all 1 million of us, or where many Presbyterians in Canada, have to approve it, at least the majority of them. So it makes it very difficult, unlike, say, the Catholic Church, where the big guys make the decisions, and that's what they are. So I do appreciate the fact that they're recognizing that small churches have problems and trying to get monies there to help them. And I've lost my position now. Right, sorry. The other increases, also we got the rent is up this year as we got a contract with the Grace Korean Church, who come normally just after us on the once or twice a week. Now, if I look at expenses of 198,000 were 48,000 higher than 2021. As 2021 received payroll support grants from the government of 29,000. The difference of 19,000 was mainly in pastoral costs, which were 10,000 higher than last year. And that meant, as I said, the bottom line, we did make a profit of 28,000 compared to a loss of 16,000. So in that sense, it's another year added to the length of tenure for the church. So the next page I'm going to look at is the front page, which is what they call the statement of financial position, or what may be better known as the balance sheet. The main thing I wanted to talk about was, if you look at the GICs are down from 504,000 to 350. As you remember last year at the annual meeting, we approved investing in what's become Raymond James's index funds, and so we put 150,000 there. So that's the reason for that switch in that one. The other thing I was going to say is that for the first time we've had this year, our investments were actually valued below cost at the end of the year. We on the statements here, we show them at cost, so we don't recognize any gains or losses. And the market value is shown on the line below where the investment is, so that the 150,000 invested in the index funds dropped to 144,000. But the main change was the preferred shares, where it's now about 20,000 below cost, and they used to be like 20 to 25,000 above. They have suffered to some degree with the market situation. They've also suffered to the fact that interest rates have gone up. But the main thing about them, and the security factor about them, is they're issued at a par value of $25. So when the banks come to decide to redeem them, they have to pay $25. The $25 is above our costs, so we'll always at one stage get that money back, even if it's well past my grave, but we will get it back. That's my overview of 2022. Is there any questions before I go into the budget? Not a lot of questions today, Al. Oh. We, the members' equity is basically the amount of equity that the church has built up through since the year since it started. And it's represented by cash investments and any cash net of liabilities and investments. So we have grown through the years to get about 900,000, but and as you can see, our investments are 800 and the cash is 100, so that's basically what it is. As we sustain losses, this amount will come down, and when it gets to a certain stage, that's when the concerns will really raise about what the future holds. Okay, I'm going down to start looking at the budget, and the budget is the last 2 pages. And I'll start by saying, since it's not the same as the first page, the reason is, in presenting the budget, I've tried to compare something that might give it a little better comparison. So the 2022 actual column, which is the second column, has taken out all the one-offs and moved them into different spots. They're down in actually the bottom of page 2 if you actually ever get there. So the key budget assumption is that a new minister will be appointed and take up the position halfway through the year. So we've got half of his costs in there effectively. Overall, and as out of that, overall the deficit of the year is expected to be about 16,000. For information purposes, having a minister for 12 months would equal a deficit of about 60 to 65,000. So it sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. We're losing on an annual basis, but it's less than we actually we thought about. And one of the reasons is that we've been able to get a few more elements of revenue, and we've been taking a strong view on cost control to try and keep that down. So that's one reason why but looking at the detail, the revenue is expected to be 137,000 compared to 159,000 because of expected reduction in envelope receipts and bequests, which we never budget. So if any big request came in, that would also offset it. And they're offset by increased interest, which is a function of the fact that in the middle of the year we reinvested in the GIC at 4.55%, I think, compared to what it was originally at about 1.9. So that helped move it up from year to year. I will say that the envelope receipts jumped in December as people, I guess, tried to catch up. So there may be some area for a little improvement there. I would ask, as usual, my annual ask is, if you are thinking of doing that, it would really help you if we did it throughout the year and not just in December the 21st or something. The total expenses are budgeted to be about 145,000 compared to 198,000 in 2022, or decreased by 43,000. The main variance is pastoral costs, which is budgeted to decrease by 44,000 due to the cost related to the new minister only starting in July. Other changes tend to offset. However, it should be noted that we are not budgeting to support Presbyterian sharing in 2023, which is savings of about 10,000. We have budgeted for the increases at the interest rates that they're going through. Sorry, not the interest rates, the inflation rates that are going through. So I think the expenses are fairly solid. I will repeat, obviously, that when we do the budget for the expenses, we tend to know most of them. We know, for example, the salary structures which are going to be put in because they're provided to us by the presbytery, and we've seen the increases in the utility costs, which is the other main cost. So that, that's why it's fairly solid. In the end, page 2, you'll see that the overall loss is expected to be about just over 8,000. Compared to a gain of 28,000 last year, but it's still at an area where it's controllable. That's all I really have to say about it. But so before I ask for it to be approved, could I ask any questions? Thanks, Susan.
Under organist supplies, when Kenta came, I was asked to write a letter as to what the music budget should be, and I said $1,000 to take into account. So I don't know why it's at 500.
don't know answer, I don't know the answer to that either. I think because that's what you used, well, we didn't use any in the prior year, so that's one. I can't, I don't know. Yes. We're really a government agency. Don't forget though that no, that's okay. That's how we'll leave it there. I would say, I mean, just sorry to finish. A budget is a budget. It's a one look at one position. And as Bob has talked about, he wants more money for this or next thing. So if you come to need more money for your own committee, you just have to come to us with a rational reason for it. I mean, we're not going to cut our own nose off to spite our face to some degree. Sorry, that's not a question.
That's what I wanted to know. If there is a wonderful project that one of the committees decides they would like to do, we can go into our funds to.
Well, I think the methodology is you'd go to session and get session to approve it, and then session would come to finance committee to get the money approved.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right?
Yes.
Thank you. Any more questions? So if there are any question, could I ask somebody to motion to approve the budget as presented? David, yeah. Do we have a seconder? Ina. All in favor? Looks like it passed.
I think so.
I'll hand the thing back to Al.
Did you do both the report and the budget?
I didn't do the report. You want to do the report?
Yeah, we should have.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the report as I presented? Ina.
Seconder?
Dave.
Margaret?
Oh, Margaret, okay.
All in favor of accepting the financial report as presented? Carried. Thank you, Robin. I'll just make a couple of comments. Let's make a couple of brief comments. If you look at in the annual report on page 16, just to explain a couple of the differences that Robin referred to. In that report on page 16, for the revenues for 2022, it shows there that 12.3% of our revenue, or $24,000, came from reserve funds. And Robin said, I think the word you used would be had a profit of. That may not have been the best term to use. But what that meant was that we had revenues which exceeded our costs by that amount. And the reason our revenues exceeded our costs, whereas this report is saying we had to take $24,000 from reserve funds, was that we had a fairly large bequest from the estate of one of our members who passed. And in the report that said we had to take $24,000 from reserve funds, that didn't recognize that bequest as part of our revenue because we moved it directly into the reserve funds. If you read the comments later on, it says that even though we had to take money from reserve funds, our actual cash on hand or reserves was bigger at the end of the year. That's because we took $24,000 out and moved a lot more than that in as a result of the bequest. That's why it says that. But what that really means is that the money we raised on operations over the year was $24,000 less than we spent. Living off bequests from members who passed is not something that is successful in the long term. And then on the question of use it or lose it, that's a term that often is used. I don't actually agree with it, but I think what Sandy said summarized my philosophy on the budget better. That is, if you need it, use it. If you don't need it, don't spend it. Don't just spend it because it's in the budget. My career was in the private sector, and if you came in under budget, that was a good thing. Any other questions of Robin on his report? Then the next item on the agenda is new treasurer needed. Robin has submitted his resignation to be effective the end of this month. Fortunately, Robin and Ina have both offered to help us through the transition period, so come April the 1st, we're not out of luck, but it's to help us through the transition period. It's not to solve the fact that we need a new treasurer. So I ask any of you who feel you have the capabilities and the time to take that on, or know of someone who does, to step forward and make those suggestions to your elder, or to me, or to Robin, or to anyone you want to, because we need to replace our treasurer. The report on the search committee is our next item. Bob, do you want to introduce that? You can stay or move as you wish.
So Al has most of the information that you want to hear. So just a brief outline of how we started. Since Grace and Hillview became Graceview, we've had 3 search committees, so we're getting good at it. So we know what needs to be done. And what needs to be done in a search is to start with consultation with the congregation, and that is followed by the creation of a church profile that is distributed through the national church to ministers who may be interested. And that is followed by the actual search process itself, where we review those applications and go and visit people and so on, and ultimately call a minister. And that is followed by an integration process to bring the minister into the congregation and make him or her part of the family and feel at home. So it's in years gone by, those things have been sort of left to a small committee, and it's a lot of work. And so this year we decided that maybe we would break that up and get everybody involved. So everybody on session had a role to play in some of those committees. And thankfully, many members of the congregation joined those committees to bolster them and to sort of create a broader base of support and input. So we had a consultation committee, and Maureen took the lead on that, along with others who joined. And we had a profile committee, and Kathy took the lead on that. And we have a search committee, and Al has got the lead on that and is doing an exceptionally good job, and it's underway at the moment. And eventually we'll have an integration committee, but it's not been formed yet because we need the minister. So that's the process that we have followed, and it seems to have worked quite well. And I know that you want to hear more about the actual search right now. So, Al.
Okay, thank you. So I'll outline to you some of the things we've been doing within the search committee. The search team began its work in late October, and when the consultation team and the profile team had completed their work, we had as one of our starting points the work completed by them in determining from the congregation the qualifications that the congregation would be looking for in a new minister, plus a profile of our congregation for consideration by the candidates. So we give them our profile and they give them their background. The primary method of advertising to attract a potential minister in the Presbyterian Church in Canada is through a website that's operated by the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and we placed our information on the site at the beginning of January of this year. When a church advertises on the Presbyterian Church in Canada website, 2 things happen. First, the head office sends to the church the resumes of candidates who have advised the church that they would be open to a call to churches with a particular set of desired criteria, and the Presbyterian Church in Canada decides if our profile matches what those candidates have said they were looking for. Through that process, we received referrals of 9 candidates from the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Of those 9, we determined who were of interest to us, and we followed up with them. We followed up with 4 of them. Of those 4, 1 never responded to us because circumstances may have changed for them since they advised the Presbyterian Church in Canada that they would be looking for a call. 1 advised that they will not be pursuing our vacancy because for various reasons it wasn't matching their criteria. 1 is located outside the country, so we're not pursuing that person at this time. And we've been listening to and attending services conducted by the 4th candidate that we were interested in. The second thing that happens when the advertisement goes on the church's website is our information becomes available to others who may want to apply. And through that process, we have received 5 applications so far. 3 of those are of interest to us, and we are following up with them, but we're not following up with the other 2 because we did not feel that their background matched our objectives at this time. Some of the ones we aren't actively pursuing right now are still there if we aren't successful with the ones we are looking at, but we're more actively pursuing those that seem to be best suited to what we're looking for. Of the 3 of interest, 2 were received several weeks ago, and we have been visiting them at churches where they're conducting services and seeing them online. And 1 applied more recently, and we're just starting to visit them and evaluate them. And I think that's why Nancy missed church this morning. She was visiting them, and others will be over the next weeks. So in summary, we have to date received 14 applications. We have narrowed that down to 3 people who we view as being strong candidates, and we understand there could be 1 or 2 other candidates who apply, and we will be continuing the process of attending services where those candidates are conducting the services in other churches to help us assess their desirability for us and their suitability. And at the same time, we are finalizing interview questions that we will use once we have satisfied ourselves that they are a good candidate for us, and we will be conducting interviews with them probably beginning in May. Our goal is still to have a final candidate to recommend by the middle of the year, but our emphasis is on being confident in our recommendation rather than quick in our timing with that recommendation. So there's eight of us on the committee, and I thank all of them for the work they're doing on the committee and in the visitations, and for Tim and his leadership. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Okay. So our volunteers, at a time like this, we really are dependent on our volunteers. This morning was a good example where, first of all, thanks to Sandy for making the order of service and the sermon available to us, and for all of those who participated in that. So we're dependent on volunteers for actually conducting services and for doing all of the work that needs to get done in addition to that. To Earl and the property committee for all of the things they do to look after the property. For all of our other committees who lead things within the church and who do things outside the church, like out of the cold. And the problem is when you start to name things, you miss out a whole lot. So I think we'll just say thanks to all our volunteers and keep up the good work. Please join me in expressing our thanks. Any new business that anyone wants to raise? If not, I will ask Tim to come forward. Oh, Bob.
Can we just take a moment to recognize Robin and all he's done for finances of this church, having taken it over after Sue? How long, Robin?
10 years?
No, it's not 10, is it?
I think so. When did Sue pass?
I don't know.
Errol, when did
Time
Sue
goes by
pass?
quickly, but however long it was, Robin has done an exceptional job of looking after our finances, so thank you to Robin.
And Tim, thank you for taking care of us in your own church, too.
Great. Well, I love being with people, and it's been great to get to know some of this congregation over the 9 months. I think I've been here now. So, yeah, I wrote down as I was sitting there just thinking of the good things that Graceview has going for it. And certainly one thing is, to start on the exterior and work to the heart, but it's a really well maintained. I know there's problems, Earl and others who work on the maintenance, but it's a really nice looking building compared to many churches that have like cobwebs and dungy basements, and you folks do quite well at keeping this building look presentable and appropriate for the purpose for which it was set up, to glorify God, a place to worship together and to welcome and bless people. So be encouraged. It's a beautiful location as far as by the park and school and neighborhood. And again, like St. Giles Kingsway, many of you don't know where it is because it's so well hidden. It's behind Loblaws in a little neighborhood, right? And it's very hard to find. So these are good things that just naturally you've inherited, and it's a blessing. I noticed quite quickly you're also a very well managed church. There's a lot of managers, there's a lot of business people with their ties and do things well. And sure, I kind of joke about it. We know that's not what the church is all about, but it sure helps. It sure helps to put together attractive looking booklets like this AGM booklet. You have the best one in the presbytery. Yeah, for sure. And again, I know it's not all about that, but it presents that you care and that you put some thought into it. And the volunteers we thank, it's not easy to do that. Your photo album is so nicely put together. Even the process for the search committee to be broken into different sections so that one group doesn't bear all the weight and potentially blame if things go badly, and doesn't get all the praise if it goes exceptionally well. Really, and I think many other congregations will lean on that model in the future. I certainly will, as an interim moderator with another church, encourage them to do it that way. So you're to be commended for that. And the elders, you have 13 elders in a pretty small church, but they want to be there. They're not forced to be there. They are committed, and they want to serve this congregation well, give it the best chance for the future. So these are many things to be very, very grateful for. And so, moving into the future, I had my Bible nearby. Let me grab one here. Yeah, we're talking about maybe a minister at the halfway point of 2023. I think that's very realistic. I know from the financial point of view, it's kind of the longer we wait, the better for finances. But, I think taking that risk and bringing a full-time minister in, you kind of feel like, I don't know if we can financially handle that. But that is, I believe, with God's help, the best hope you have for the future. If you bring in a half-time minister, they're going to be working at Starbucks or have some other job the rest of the week. They're not focused on this task. Ministers need to be focused on their flock, on the congregation, and to really give themselves fully to the work of the Lord in this place. They won't be available every day. Your minister will have a Sabbath day, I hope, for their help and to be able to endure in the long run. But I applaud you for seeking a full-time minister, and I pray in a year or two from now you'll say, I'm glad we did that. So you folks are salt of the earth. You've heard that phrase before. It comes from the famous Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5. You are the salt of the earth. You know the second illustration Jesus gives there, right? Just after that, you are the salt of the earth, and you are the light. Yeah, light of the world. That's the second one. I'll read that one because that I just want us to meditate on as we close. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father who is in heaven. Why you do the good you do and manage so well, I pray and trust the unified focus is there. It's so people may see your good deeds and the good work and not praise you, but glorify your Father in heaven. It's for God's glory. That's why we do what we do as a church. And I believe this church is unified in that. And you've already had a sermon today. I won't continue reflecting on the passage. But yeah, I encourage us to think about that. It's good to applaud volunteers and encourage one another and let people know you've done a great job. But we know why we get our well done from God as we follow Jesus. So with those words, do I say a closing prayer, Al? Is that appropriate?
Yes, please.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I pray that the congregation of Graceview Presbyterian Church feels your love. And even though they're not there yet, that they sense a little of that well done. They will one day hear when they enter your heavenly court. May they be encouraged. There is much work, and it can be a burden in this process, especially upon the spiritual leaders chosen by this congregation through your Holy Spirit's leading. But lift up their hearts. May you give them signs of peace and signs of joy in the midst of the task. Loving God, we give you thanks for this time together just to reflect on the year gone by, the challenges, the burdens, but also the joys, and to pause and say, wow, God, you did it again. You brought us through another year. May we have hearts of hope as we look to the year ahead. May we not invest too much hope in a person who is to come among us as leader, but may we put our hope in you, Lord Jesus, that you will lead the right partner in ministry to come among this congregation, to work alongside, to be their teaching elder, to point them to you, Christ, the hope we have. And so we collect our unified prayers in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Tim. We have a motion to adjourn. Robin? All in favor? Carried. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Well done, Jackie. The official secretary for every committee.
Okay.